the team I always compare them to is that Miami Heat super team. Even though there are a lot of differences, certainly, but we see that these super teams, like their rosters get diminished pretty quickly. You get guys on veteran minimum contracts that then maybe you won't have the next year. Like, for example, Blake Griffin. You have several players that were instrumental for this Nets team, part of that because of injuries, but that may be moving on after this season to other teams. Like Spencer Dinwiddie, it was just announced earlier today, he is not going to accept his player option for $12.5 million. He's going to test free agency. You'd imagine they wouldn't be able to bring him back. So along with that, you have a team that's another year older that had these significant injury issues. James Harden has always been very durable, but KD and Kyrie have always been pretty injury prone, or at least KD in more recent years has been. So I don't know. I think everyone talks about it as like a foregone conclusion that the Nets are going to be the 1 seed and march to the finals with a vengeance next year. But how likely do you see that being the case, and what's next for the Nets in general?
Well, correct me if I'm wrong, Matt. I mean, you're a huge LeBron fan. No.
Yeah, you're right.
Yeah,
you're
that's
right.
true. Times have changed, certainly.
You're right.
And certainly in your Heat days. So transport yourself into LeBron into 2010.
Yeah. Really, just the last 2 years, not as big a fan. But you're absolutely right.
So, correct me if I'm wrong. LeBron had a lot to do with player personnel, did he not, on those teams, or somewhat, along with Pat Riley per se?
Yeah, I think so. Especially, I would say like the last 2 years, he got a little bit more of a hold. Like, for example, tweeting out that he likes Shabazz Napier.
Sure.
And then the Heat drafting him.
Sure.
He had some more influence there. I think Pat Riley held the reins pretty firmly.
Sure.
Which is why I think the Heat was a better structural setup. When he moved to Cleveland for the second trip around there, it was like full control. Like, you want this coach we just got gone? Okay, he's gone, LeBron. That was full-on GM LeBron, in my opinion.
Yeah. Well, to that point, and with the Heat specifically, a little bit of LeBron, a lot Pat Riley, they knew with Dwayne Wade, Chris Bosh, and LeBron, they had to put pieces around them that are going to play with little to no money, right? But they fit the system. And I think that's what Brooklyn is dealing with right now, right? Steve Nash is a first-year coach. You don't have that stability of shaping a team like you do with the Miami Heat. And I think that's what you saw in this series. And not to mention, I mean, with this starting lineup, they played very sparingly together. I mean, that's another issue. So I think for the Brooklyn Nets, what they have to look for is kind of a Miami Heat approach, like you're saying, man, in terms of finding players that are going to play for that kind of veterans minimum, players that are hungry and they want to win, and that are pieces that are going to complement those three players. Now, I think with Kyrie, James Harden, and Kevin Durant, it's fairly obvious the team was flawed defensively, even though, to Ernie Johnson's point on Inside the NBA yesterday, they did a better job of holding the Milwaukee Bucks. They're pretty good offensively. But nevertheless, in a full season, I think it is, in my mind, they need to find pieces that are going to complement those three when they're going to be hurt. Because it's obvious these three are not going to play an 82-game season. And Kevin Durant is committed to the Olympics, which shocked me. So he's not going to get that much rest. I mean, the Olympics start, I believe, in August, if I'm wrong in the comments. So just imagine, there's no rest. I mean, he gets, like a month maybe? Coming off like a huge injury. I mean, that is a lot. So in my mind, for the Brooklyn Nets, I think their focus has to be a situation in which the players that they get, they can somewhat fill the roles if these players are not playing in a cohesive lineup. So, for instance, your main Thursday night game and your main marquee Saturday night game, you would like to see all three of those guys out there. Kind of the other games where you're dealing with, Monday, Tuesday, or like a back-to-back, you can kind of sit one, play the other two. Worst comes to worst, sit two, play one, and your role players, you can win with them most nights. So I think that's what their objectives has to be. I think the Nets overachieved somewhat. I think with Blake Griffin, I think he was a fantastic addition.
Yeah.
I mean, Kevin Durant highlighted him in the post-game press conference. So I don't know what his future is with that team, but if they can kind of find a way to keep him on there somehow, that would be nice. I think Blake Griffin, through his play, probably enhanced his value. So I'm sure he's looking for more on the market. So I think overall for Brooklyn, I think like you said, Matt, I think their focus kind of find guys that are hungry, that are not like big marquee names that can play around these three. But you're right. I think there are huge concerns. I think the Kyrie Irving things is a massive question mark. I don't know if this guy's in line to play basketball. I think that's something in the summer he needs to discover. And that's something from like a human being standpoint. Like, it just seems like he's unhappy out there, and I just don't understand. He has enough money. I mean, just retire. And that's not me knocking him. That's not me hating on him. I've had my own opinions on Kyrie, but it just seems separate from the injuries. It just seems like this guy has bigger issues on his mind besides dribbling a basketball on the court.
He was taking frequent personal days.
Yeah, he has, which there's nothing wrong with that. I just think committing to this team, there's got to be just some kind of like thing of like, hey, communication and just him being honest with himself. So I know I rambled on there, but I think with the Nets, I think it's still possible for them to be the favorite. I like these three together. I think when they're on the court, they were awesome. And despite their defensive flaws, I do think they are a formidable force to win the NBA title. And this is my opinion. So overall, address those weaknesses and address what happens with Kyrie. And I think they're still going to be the favorite. How about you, Matt?
Yeah, and I think it's a more appealing situation than the Miami Heat, because with the Heat, those three played throughout the seasons, like their first season together all the way through their final fourth season. Those three guys were on the court, taking up a lot of minutes. Whereas with the Nets, you're right in that we only saw these guys play together, I believe it was 11 or 12 games where these three all played together. That was due to different circumstances, as everyone knows. Sometimes it was injuries, sometimes it was Kyrie taking a personal day, etc. But point being, that's probably appealing for a free agent, and that you are going to get some runtime, as well as all three of these guys were great distributors during the season. So even more so than in that Miami Heat setup, you're going to get the ball and you're going to be relied on to knock down some jumpers. So like if you go back in a time machine and bring back a younger Ray Allen, I think he fits in even better in a situation like this to be the other Joe Harris on the roster, or fill that role. I mean, look how good of a season Joe Harris had, just being that guy who could knock down 3-pointers with the hand in his face, but now he gets wide open 3-pointers a lot of the time because of the attention that those big three draw on the offensive end of the floor. So I think if they can stay healthy, it's their title to lose for sure. And I think even maybe so above the Lakers, depending on how LeBron is looking next year. LeBron has been beating Father Time for the longest time, but at some point he is going to slow down, and the East is an easier pathway to the finals. So even with the Bucks, getting that done, you're right in that I'm with you. I don't think they would have gotten this done had the Nets been healthy. I don't even know if the game goes or if the series goes 6 games.
True.